start up. I'm gonna let you start. You got it, Roger.
Hey, Curly, thanks so much. So I'm just really excited. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about drone energy. I've been going to drone meetups and meeting with some amateurs and even professional drone pilots, and they're getting jobs. And I asked them, how are you getting jobs? And their answer is, I'm just getting it through word of mouth or through friends or something like that. And frankly, I just thought there's got to be a better way, right? So yeah, I went out and I looked, and there are a couple of websites that just do everything, and drones happen to be a part of that. So I thought I can do that better. And so my business right now, my entrepreneurial venture is to try and do a better marketplace to put drone pilots, commercial drone pilots, with people who want their skills, like real estate photographers and landscape analysis and wedding photography and all those cool things that people like to use their drones for. So rather than try and go word of mouth or hope that you get somebody's nephew to come out and do your wedding for you, I want to put together real life commercial pilots with people looking for their services.
I love it, Roger. I think Professor Clark was saying like it's kind of this Fiverr for drone kind of economy. I love it, and thanks for sharing it with the group. Thanks everybody coming to tech school. We always at the beginning always highlight new concepts, new ideas. I love that actually part of it. Sam, do you have anything before we introduce our speaker, Andy? You have anything about on the Innovation Hub?
Yeah, thanks, Curleen. A couple of quick things to announce with the Innovation Hub. First, we are in the process this week of recruiting students to our I3T program, intercollegiate team program that focuses on emerging technology. So we're looking for students from cross-disciplinary, so engineers, computer scientists, physics, and also business students who are interested in helping develop a technology and look for commercialization opportunities. So if you're interested in that, go to the Innovation Hub website and click on the I3T program. So, and you can apply right there on instructions to apply are on there. Second, we're getting things started for an upcoming Startup Fest.
Nice.
On May 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Is going to be our Startup Fest, which will include time for small businesses. It's in collaboration with the San Marcos Chamber of Commerce, Union Co-working, the City of San Marcos, North City, and Cal State San Marcos. So we're going to be doing a lot of different events and activities, including an NFT art gallery, small business, farmers market, and also pitch competition. So lots of things coming on. Look for that. Look for things coming out about that shortly. Anyway, I'll turn it back over to Curly and introduce our guest speaker. Thanks.
That's great, Andy. Thanks for coming on. I met Andy, he was a Chief Impact Officer at Workforce Partnership, which I love Workforce Partners. All the stuff they're doing, I learned a lot. Andy was kind of like a little mentor on me on like it's got to be data driven. You gotta look at the data. But and also we worked together at Workforce Venture. It's kind of like a venture helping with ISAs and people, but. When Andy said I want to start doing other things, I want to help more groups. I said, Andy, you want to just come on the show and we just talk about it and then get people's feedback and you giving us feedback. So, Andy, thanks for coming on. I'm going to let you have the floor. But good to see you, Christy, Monal too. We have some people from the other cohorts. But I'll let you have the floor, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Curling, and hi everybody. It's great to be here. This is a conversation that Curling and I probably just wanted to have generally, so it's nice to have it on Zoom. A lot of people. And just to note before I dive in, I'm getting for whatever reason, it hasn't happened all day, I'm getting the low system resources. Yeah, so if I have trouble, that's why. As Curling said, I've kind of gone into a new chapter of my career, and I want to share that a little bit. But just starting out, I graduated from UC San Diego in 2010, right at the height of the Great Recession. Couldn't find a job. No one who graduated in my class that I knew had a full-time job with benefits at all for about a year. So just kind of contrast that with today's graduates who are coming into one of the hottest labor markets in our history. I scratched some things together, a few part-time jobs to make ends meet. I finally landed with a consulting company called Public Consulting Group, and we specialized in trying to make government work better for people. And for their constituents, and mostly state and local governments. And the first couple of projects that I we're helping people who are receiving SNAP benefits, maybe better known as food stamps, and TANF welfare to work program benefits and employment programs, better known as welfare. And getting into the guts of those programs taught me a lot about the differences between how people talk about these programs and the people who benefit from them, and actually what it's like on the ground. And that was an incredibly valuable experience. I worked there for about 4 years. They paid for me to get an MBA at a school out in Massachusetts. And then I kind of was sick of the daily travel of a management consulting career in my first, few years cutting my teeth, which was basically leave on Sunday for client meetings on the East Coast or in the South or in the Midwest on Monday morning and get home Thursday night. Say hi to my girlfriend, now wife, and a few friends, and then get back on the plane the next Sunday. And that got old after a couple of years. And so one of the clients that I had worked with was the San Diego Workforce Partnership, which is a nonprofit 501c3 here in San Diego that administers about $40 million or so a year of job training and hiring programs for San Diego residents and businesses. And so I was as Curling said, the chief impact officer there, and for a while the chief operating officer. And for a long time I was speaking with our CEO and friend Peter Kallstrom about, hey, I kind of want to scratch this entrepreneurial itch that I have to kind of do provide services across the country to organizations like the San Diego Workforce Partnership and other businesses related to making those programs run better, work better. We can talk about that here in a second. And then COVID happened and kind of put our succession planning plans on hold. Helped the organization kind of steer through COVID, which for an employment program was or an employment system rather was rocky times. We have big centers out in the community where the public can come and receive services. And so we had to close those down, make sure our workers were safe, make sure our contractors were safe, make sure the public was safe in accessing our services, moving everything online. And then everything that every business has had to deal with for the past couple of years. And, now on the other side of at least our response to how we're going to provide services to the public through COVID-19, it was time for me to pull the trigger. And on January 4th, I resigned from the San Diego Workforce Partnership and started a new little company that I'm calling Trailhead Strategies. And I think, a big part of why I started the company was to, again, just scratch that entrepreneurial itch to go out and see if I can kind of make it on my own and if people would pay me for that. But also maybe more importantly, I think there's kind of this fundamental gap in that I want to fill with my business. And I think, basically my company helps clients design and finance, execute and measure talent initiatives or workforce initiatives. So my clients are businesses who want to get serious about hiring and training and doing it in particularly in non-traditional ways with more diverse talent, but also impact investors who are looking to invest in innovative financial products that help people access training and education like income share agreements. And we might talk about that here in a second. How do they do diligence on those deals? How do they structure those deals? What financial instruments do they deploy? And then how do they measure the outcomes of those deals financially, but also socially, and how we're impacting our communities that they're investing in? And then I'm working with some government agencies on designing and executing better hiring and workforce programs. And then my last kind of set of clients, which maybe is most interesting, are businesses. And I think maybe more specifically, businesses who are doing it right by their workers. And I think, there's several hundreds of millions of dollars in federal, state, and increasingly local government dollars to help companies hire. But it's just hard to tap into, as many of you who have tried it know. And so part of my services include kind of bridging that gap and helping companies who are quote unquote doing it right by their employees in terms of wages, in terms of benefits, in terms of ownership and voice and culture and safety, tap into more of those government dollars. And so I think we'll share a slide here in a second, and I'll talk more about that. But maybe I'll stop there in terms of my own little personal journey. I guess a big factor too, Curling, I know you wanted me to share a little bit of this, is like, you only get to live once. And I've always said that I wanted to do my own thing. I loved my job, had a lot of security in that. But when the time came, it was time to rip the Band-Aid off, and I'm glad I did a month and a half ago.
Yeah, I think the world's better for it. It's a little better for it that you can help more groups though.
So where do we want to go next, Curly? I can jump in and talk a little bit about some
Well, we can go to the slides if you want to just go over that part too. I have a few questions from people who couldn't come on the whole aspect of this key thing, quality jobs, right? I'm with Connect All and different groups, and that word quality jobs always comes up with our startups. Like, yeah, we're gonna create more jobs with our startups. So what's that word? What's a quality job? What's a quality position? So I have some questions around that from part of the cohort. And the last part, and the other part was more, I think when you put public dollars in your title, that made people think about what does that look like?
Yeah. So here's kind of the journey, if you will. My company is called Trailhead Strategies. The idea is that I'm with my clients for the entire journey.
I like that.
Related to quality jobs, good companies, diverse talent, and public dollars. I think let's start with the problem of quality jobs.
Sure.
So most people don't realize this, but about more than 20 million of people on public assistance, food stamps, welfare, Medicaid for the poor, are actually working full time. And it doesn't really, but they need public assistance to make ends meet, and they qualify for public assistance by the definition of poverty that our country has established in legislation. And so I don't think it matters what political persuasion you are, and where you fall on the left-right spectrum. The idea that someone working full-time has to still live in poverty just shouldn't add up. I mean, and many of these workers are in S&P 500 companies that have billion-dollar valuations, that are paying workers who need public assistance to put food on the table for themselves and their families. And these aren't part-time workers. These aren't college students who want to work for the summer. These are full-time workers, need public assistance to make ends meet. Over 20 million. That's a large chunk of our workforce. And so to me, that's a problem. And that problem comes down to how do we value some specific jobs and industries, and how do we compensate people for those jobs? And then maybe broader questions about job quality. And so at the same time that's happening, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of federal, state, and local money designed to help people get jobs and then get better jobs and ultimately get off public assistance. And a lot of that money actually either goes unspent or goes to the same kind of incumbent companies who have done the hard work over several decades to figure out how to optimize their business models to take advantage of those government programs. And so my company was built and is designed to help new companies with potentially new visions of how to treat employees, who their stakeholders are, including community, including their workers, including environment, to tap into a larger share of government incentives and subsidies to create better jobs in their companies, have more diverse talent in their companies, and to get more and more people who are working full time to not also have to rely on food stamps and Medicaid to make ends meet. And so I think many of the entrepreneurs, Curling, in your cohorts are certainly thinking and doing this. And so, that's my kind of target customer, kind of the new generation of business leaders who prescribe to what's called sometimes stakeholder capitalism, is who I'm working with. And so we can go in and talk through some of these services, but Curling, I'd love for you to see.
We have Mono, who's part of cohort 1. Mono's on. Mono has used workforce partnership and tech hire. I believe Mono, I don't know how many tech hires you did hire, but that was like one of the services that a lot of our startups really, and that was one of your programs, Andy, that it resonated for them. They would gonna have someone who was going to actually help them move their startup forward, right? Move forward, and then if that works out well, our startups would hire them, right? That part, and Mono was totally like a great case study for it. But things like that, I felt like we at least giving visibility during this session is really great. But even some things that we don't know as this cohort, is there other things that is there other tech hire type of programs, or is there other things like that that you give visibility to? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, totally. Hi, Mono. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I hope your company is continuing to grow. Okay, well, I'm going to change slides here. This is kind of the path. And hey, my company is a month old. I don't have a nice logo yet. I'm working on that. And some of these slides aren't crisp as they're going to be. But
it's good, Andy. It's like we were just talking about MVP. It's solid.
Exactly, Curling. You were like, yeah, just get it out into the world, and sometimes good things happen. So that's what we're doing today.
Exactly.
So on the tax credit side, I'd say for startups with one or fewer, one or even less than 10 employees, this isn't necessarily, I don't think, a great use of your time while you're still getting your business off the ground. But I have partnered with a company called RetroTax, which has been doing work opportunity tax credits and other tax credits reimbursements for companies on a contingency fee for several decades. So if a company is hiring from any of these populations, basically I'll work with you to assess if this is a fit for you, forward you along to RetroTax. They do all the work, they process the paperwork, they take a 20% contingency fee. And at the end of the tax year, you get your credit on your tax return. That's a dollar for dollar discount on your end of the year tax bill if you're making money. So I know that doesn't always apply to kind of early stage startups, but I think it's something as your businesses, you all are going to IPO and make, hundreds of millions of dollars and hire hundreds of people. So once that happens, you can refer this to your HR department.
Yeah, that those are people that would actually probably take this knowledge, right? More on the HR groups.
Yeah, for this particular one especially. This next one is really kind of my sweet spot, and tech hire that you mentioned, Curling, and that Mono has been a part of, would fall in the on-the-job training category, although it might be a lower amount depending on the length of time. But these are all mostly federal and state programs that people can tap into for workers at a lower rate. And the intention is that you're actually giving them skills to be successful with your company and with other companies maybe after they move on. But starting from the top, on the job training, these are pretty simple contracts with a workforce development board that I help clients develop. That basically pays for half of their wage, a worker's wage for the first 180 days. And these range from about $5,000 to $15,000 per worker, depending on the wage that they're being paid. And so it's a way that, maybe some of your early companies or early employees, you could subsidize, instead of bringing on one employee, you could have an OJT contract and bring on two as you're kind of getting up to speed. The one right below that is expanded subsidized employment. This is a program through the county welfare to work program that pays 100% of wages of new hires. Dod Skill Bridge program is for transitioning service members. You sign up, you become a Dod Skill Bridge program site, and for the last 6 months or 180 days of a service member's service or enlistment time, they work for your company, and DoD pays them, payrolls them, pays workers' comp, and provides their health insurance and all that stuff. And I do know a Navy SEAL who used this program to become a co-founder of a very successful company now, and his first 6 months were working for the DoD Skill Bridge program. And that company was out in El Cajon, and it's a construction company, kind of a construction tech company, I'd say.
Yeah, I love that case study. I love stories like that, Andy, because the first part of our cohorts, half of our founders were veterans, right? So having them know more about this and helping their peers, I think that's a great win-win program.
Yep. Yeah. The other programs, I mean, these are all just that are available. I think they all kind of depend on your situation, but SNAP Employment and Training, that's for provides 50% of reimbursement for wages or training for people who are on SNAP, better known as food stamps. Employment Training Panel for companies in California, and they're actually ETP, the state agency, doing more and more work with early stage entrepreneurs, and some of that money from the governor's budget is now kind of hitting the street, and you can get about a little under $5,000 per employee for hiring and training. And incumbent worker training is I think becoming more and more relevant to this job quality discussion. Like, how do you take a frontline employee who maybe is doing some customer service roles and giving them some training for some technical skills, whether that's software engineering or something else, and helping them get up to the next step in your company, and there's subsidies for that. And then finally, registered apprenticeship programs. I think, typically apprenticeship programs, we think of that in the trades or the crafts, construction crafts. We're seeing more and more apprenticeship programs pop up in software engineering and software development. In fact, a local one called Creating Coding Careers is one of my clients and doing some really interesting and cool stuff. And they're churning out top-notch ServiceNow and Microsoft Azure data quality engineers. If folks are looking for them, I can connect up, but there's some subsidies for hiring those folks. There's a few other programs, but this is kind of my sweet spot, and I can curling. I sound like
no, I like getting like what your niche is, right? Like one question I have for, and offhand note, a lot of our groups, even though we have been helping a lot of San Diego groups, but a lot of people that come on, like Joanne Pentages, they're in Pittsburgh, and we have a couple groups in Maryland and New York and things like that. I did see this asterisk with their federal programs, meaning that if some of our startups, some of maybe the later stage groups that are in outside California, they could all still benefit from this.
Yeah, all of these are operating all across the country except the employment training panel that's paid for out of a California payroll tax that private sector employers pay. So that's only available to California companies. But everything else is, there's some version of what we have here in San Diego in every county or township or tribal area across the country.
No, that's great. And my other question on this too, on just like this kind of requirements piece, we are working with groups that are outside the U.S. Offhand, Andy, what does that look like for groups like that?
Yeah, so this is for U.S. workers. If a company is based in another country but has workers in the United States, most of these programs will qualify.
Okay, fair enough. That's great. That's good. That's good news.
I think all of them would qualify. It's about where the worker is, and because conceptually these programs are funded by tax dollars, and so they benefit U.S. taxpayers basically.
That's a very clear answer. I like that one. Right? Yeah, you help out the people who are helping out. This is good. And now we have the chat open to like Mono or Roger or Chrissy. That if you guys want to add some questions on chat or unmute yourself, that's totally fine. I think me and Andy we're agile if you want to ask some questions with some of these specifically. But those are some initial questions I had, Andy. You can continue on.
Yeah, no problem. And last, I think these are areas that, frankly, I have relationships in and I can make connections for, but don't have all of the technical knowledge to make these things happen. But part of my practice includes connecting businesses to both government, but also what I would call impact investor financing opportunities. So on the top, there's a lot of money right now in revolving loan funds, zero interest loans. PPP obviously was another area that not as specifically relevant to startups, but There's a lot of financing out there that is subsidized right now from the government, but it's complicated. And so, if folks in your network are interested in tapping into some of that, I can connect them with the people who know how to do that. The second line, employee ownership, I'm getting more and more interested in going back to job quality in kind of business models that have some kind of broad-based employee ownership. In the tech space, we think about, 80% of equity is owned by venture capital, or I'm sorry, 20% or so is owned by like CEOs, and like 80% is founders / venture capital. And this is not my area, so you all can correct me. But interestingly, like I'm really interested in working with businesses that have broad-based employee ownership. So that could be through, for larger companies, employee stock ownership plans where those companies are actually owned by a trust representing the employees' retirement accounts. And so the employees themselves actually own the companies. Or smaller scale employee ownership trust, perpetual purchase trust owned companies or cooperatives where every employee has some kind of profit sharing motive built into the company in the company's founding documents. And I'm working with several companies now on feasibility and financing their transitions from traditionally owned companies to broad-based employee-owned companies. And I think when we talk about wealth inequality and job inequality in our country, one solution is to make more capitalists, make more people who own things, including companies, and you actually start to break down some of the wealth inequality that exists in our country. So that's increasingly an interest of mine, and I have some clients doing some of that work. And I can, if you're doing something for the world and for the people who work for you, chances are there's a program or an impact investor, who's interested in helping you expand and grow. And just through my networks, I can kind of help folks navigate that world a little bit and connect to the right people for their problem. So I want to caveat this fourth bucket. I'm not saying I'm an expert in, but I know enough to kind of have a conversation and get you to the right person who can help you tap into some of these things.
I like that. I mean, Andy, I remember our trip, and I think I told Professor Clark too, because Professor Clark's from up there. But when we went to the Sorensen Winter Innovation Summit, oh man, and we met all the impact investors, all the different things. I felt like it was like this kind of treasure that's just been hidden. Impact investing, like how's that work? How's that help groups who are trying to help? You helping navigate that. I feel like you need a Sherpa to help you navigate that impact investing, right?
Yep.
And that's some of the things I wanted you just to touch bases on. But we can open up for Q&A too. Mono's been chatting with me while we've been talking. He wants to help out. He wants to help you out a little bit on some things. He'll probably reach out on the presentation part. But I'll say, Professor Clark, and if you always give some initial feedback on all these different things, but can I just, before Professor Clark comes on, can I just ask one question on quality jobs? When you say quality jobs, because I try to talk to the startups on that, but when you think about quality job, what are some of those things that come to mind, Andy? And I'll let Professor Clark add in. And I think you're on mute, I think.
Totally on mute.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, so I think, there's a few different frameworks out there, but the one that, that we've built out for a few clients, mostly government clients who are interested in this topic, are it starts with compensation and benefits. So if someone is not making a living wage, which in most counties, especially in California, is above the legally required minimum wage.
Sure.
That's one. And then the other kind of foundational component of job quality is health and safety in the workplace. And so that traditionally kind of boiled down to OSHA complaints or accidents. But I think there's an expanded definition related from COVID-19 that includes safety from, catching pandemics from customers and coworkers, or catching viruses, I should say, as a part of the pandemic. And then increasingly, mental health, and a workplace that has clear and kind of healthy cultures around diversity and discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that all workers feel like they have perspectives and voices that can be heard in the workplace. And so some of those two things are foundational. And then we kind of talk about kind of the next rung on the ladder is more kind of job features. So these are things like, does stable scheduling and predictive scheduling. And so, many of us on this phone call probably don't have to deal with this. But still to this day, many employers, many Americans have jobs where they don't get their schedule for Monday until Sunday night. They don't know if they're going to be working or not. They know they need to be available. And they can't plan things like school or childcare or just life with their partners. And so predictive and stable scheduling is an increasingly big topic around job quality. And then we also, we talked about things like retirement plans, wealth building opportunities. Some companies do things like pay for housing and pay for childcare and all of those things. And so that gets into job features, because some people, while everyone cares about wage for the most part, some people might care about childcare, and if you don't have kids, you don't really care about that. So that depends on your situation. And then maybe kind of the next other layer that we talk a lot about is upskilling opportunities. Are you in an opportunity that is a dead end job? I mean, the research is becoming increasingly clear that there truly are dead end jobs, that the big data shows that you're not likely to advance if you're kind of in some of these jobs and are not getting the skills that you need to move up. And increasingly it's clear that some kind of work with technology, computer technology, the internet is critical to having any shot at advancing, whether we're talking about construction jobs or retail jobs or healthcare jobs. Some daily interaction with technology and skill and competency building in technology is frankly now required in any kind of career advancement role. And so if you're in a role where like there's no opportunity to interact or learn skills with technology, that's increasingly clear that like the data is showing us that you get stuck in those roles for a lifetime. And then we talk about employee ownership. Having an ownership stake obviously is a great incentive for job quality. And then having companies who are paying for upskilling initiatives based on your career goals and that kind of thing are part of it. And so there's a lot more to unpack. And maybe the last thing I'll say, I mean, I think job quality and diversity, equity, inclusion, and maybe systemic issues related to racism and sexism are fundamentally linked. If you think about the industries and sectors in our country that are traditionally thought of as having poor job quality, retail, field labor, housekeeping, and childcare jobs are really low quality, low paying jobs, elder care, those are the industries that systemically and through the legal system have been intentionally designed for people of color, immigrants, and women in our country. And so you can't really untangle the issue of where good jobs are created, who gets those jobs, and where we are today with systemic and historical racism and sexism in our country. So I'll stop there.
No, that's great. Everyone has their own definition on quality jobs. I remember I always read Malcolm Gladwell, Andy, on Sup, and he said like a quality job, a quality role, and he made it more philosophical. But I think it was great. It was one that you have some sort of autonomy, right? You're not micromanaged, things of that nature. There's some of that agency there. Two, it's a complex job, has some complexity and things of that nature. Like people rather work in a lab for $80K than work for $100K in a toll booth. They've done studies on that, right? But the last one is have a quality job. Is that the things that you're doing in some ways has some impact, some that you're actually helping the company. And that's why I love the whole employee ownership piece, that what they're doing is actually, one, helping the company, but it's also helping them on wealth. When you were talking more about that, I love that. We can delve more deeper into that too, because that's something I think you're really passionate about. I think I've learned that about you. Like, you're really passionate on one, how do you help like a community generate a little bit more wealth? What does that look like right now? So we can delve in that. I did know Mono's on. Mono, can I ask you a question too? Because you're kind of a good case study on using some of these programs. I know when I talked to you a little bit about Tech Hire, and that was one of the programs that Annie created. Can you explain a little bit about what your experience was and using a program? Because traditionally, startups don't use things like Tech Hire, right? We're more going to use like a more Fiverr or something of that nature. But can you explain that?
Tech Hire was great. What's called there was during a few of the Fokcus sessions, someone from the workforce partnership like gave presentations on Tech Hire and different kind of programs they have. And so like the first couple of times I saw the presentation, I didn't like reach out for it or sign up for it. But then I'm really glad I did, because I think in total we've had probably like 4 interns, like at least 4 interns go through Tech Hire. And it's, we've hired like permanently hired like 3 of the, there's only 1 person that went through Tech Hire that we didn't bring on long term. But it was very, very useful, because it's like, they say starting a company is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane before you hit the ground, right? So the extra few seconds you have to build the plane before you hit the ground is beneficial, and that's kind of what programs like this provides.
Thanks, Mono. I always feel like Andy, you gotta have like a face there, right? That's saying like they're using these programs. Thanks for even putting some of those things in. One last question, Mono. Maybe I should say, Mono, you could give a 30 seconds on what you do too, because that totally made sense on why you would use someone from Tech Hire. You want to talk about EVT?
Sure, yeah. EVT, we specialize in automated video editing and online course creation to make online learning more accessible, efficient, and engaging. We initially started out as an automated note-taking system. So then, like if a professor is teaching on a chalkboard or whiteboard, there's a lot of students who struggle to take notes and understand at the same time. So we, I had that issue. I had a difficult time taking notes and understanding, math and engineering courses. So we built an automated note-taking system, and then we realized that, hey, we can curate other types of content from video to expedite the process for creating online learning. We've that's what we do. And the pandemic has been pretty, we initially had a device-based product, which went in classrooms, and that was starting to go well. But then, as soon as the pandemic hit, it's like we had like 24K in contracts get canceled. And then we had we had another like 40K in contracts come through, and like it was, but anyways, we had to kind of, we had some setbacks during COVID, but we kind of pivoted around that.
But it's like really complex technology that you guys doing, from AI, machine learning, computer vision. But you actually had some people from Tech Hire come in to help in some of that process. Was it more on design or things of that nature?
Oh, sure, yeah. So web development. So mainly web development, because we have a device. So it's like software systems engineering for device. We have AI, a whole bunch of AI, and then a whole bunch of web, front end, back end, cloud infrastructure, UI, UX. So it's definitely I think it's probably too complicated for your first startup. Maybe first startup, just do an app, something a little, right, little Angry Birds or something.
Angry Birds.
We went for the really complex system, and so we needed skill sets all over across the board. But mainly, it's like web infrastructure and web development. I think one person was UI UX that we brought on for Tech Hire. So it was very helpful. And I guess the only one thing about Tech Hire is like that you do need to make sure that you do go through the process earlier, because I believe the fiscal year ends in June. So then you got to make sure like you have it hire someone through tech hire before it runs out of funds for the year, because I think it's pretty typical where before at end of the year the fiscal year it run out of funds.
That's great.
Yeah, and Curling, you said this word, and Monal just touched on it. I mean, I think like most of these programs, better for worse, like need a Sherpa, or you're gonna like a guide to kind of walk you through on some of the nuances. And because it's technical, and
It is.
as an entrepreneur, I think you want to do everything, but I think reaching out to a company like RetroTax to do your work opportunity tax credits, like that's a good idea. You need to be focusing on your product and your business. You can kind of give maybe some clear direction or values that you want in your hiring programs, and see if someone who knows, it doesn't even be me, but someone who knows how to kind of walk you through and guide you, and also someone who's going to tell you, you know what, this is not a good fit for you right now, this is going to be a distraction. Right. Is needed, because I think otherwise you're already juggling so much, and getting into the kind of archaic weeds of some of these specific programs, you can get lost in there. And so this is not a pitch, like I don't think entrepreneurs precisely are kind of like my main clients, but I think I would advise to at least consider that before kind of diving in and spending a lot of your valuable time without talking to a few folks who know how these programs work mechanically.
Well, I think that one thing. Oh, you got it, Monal.
Oh, thank you. I was really surprised to see that there's demographics where you get tax credits from. Like that's really amazing. I didn't even know about that. But then I saw something with it said like ex-felons, you get tax credits. Like I feel like that should really be publicized, because the stigma of having like a felony on your record, like it's extremely hard to get a job, and it's what's called, but like the information of like, if you have you can get a tax credit if you hire ex-felon, like that's like I wonder how well known that is. Like how yeah.
I think
Good
it's
question,
like, I think a lot of the big companies, established incumbents, have departments that do this stuff. The small, the under 100 person companies, they don't have time, for the most part, to do this without help, and so most don't ever even hear about it, because there's just a resource constraint there. But I think most small mid-sized companies don't know about these things, and if they did know, maybe have tried to take advantage of it themselves off the side of their desk, but didn't make it through the labyrinth that some of these things are.
Great point. We have Professor Clark back on. Sam, can you hear us okay? She came on you. I know you're going to give a little feedback. Professor Clark he works with so many startups. He always has a really good feedback on some of these things, or what needs, but he's back on now.
Yeah, I was just going to play, kind of go with, I guess my point I was thinking of when we were talking about this is, when I look at it, most of the tax credits are for employee development, like training and kind of getting them onto the next level. And I think that'll be an important discussion, because when you're talking to different companies and people, they might not see the trade-off of, say, food stamps for a tax credit. Seems to them, is food stamps a tax credit in a sense, right? Yeah. And it's a lot less work for them to go through that and just be like, well, we could go apply for a tax credit, but that's a lot of paperwork, like you're mentioning, a lot of time, or we could just encourage them to get food stamps. I think it's a different mentality, but I think the idea of a lot of the credits is to move these people into higher skills, making them more valuable for companies, more than just having an employee, but you're getting a more valuable employee. And I think that goes to the quality. So you can pay them more because they're more valuable. It would be, I think, an important concept to communicate.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I might have there's a fundamental issue for me, is that like the company, it used to be that if you had a full-time job in our country, you could make ends meet. It's no longer the case for the most part. Most of the people living in California, living in poverty, have one adult working full-time. in particular, I want to work with companies who want to pay a living wage, not a minimum wage. And so I think like I'm focusing a lot of my work on those companies specifically.
Yeah, and I think it's just the idea of like from a startup or founder's perspective, like you were mentioning, it's a lot of work to go through the credit space. And do they in their minds, I'm not saying like in their minds, they think they still get to take advantage of those tax benefits, but individuals do it versus me going through all the paperwork. I agree with you 100% in terms of providing a livable wage, but I think I'm commenting a little bit more like, I think your thing is very valuable because I think employers would rather do what you're talking about versus sending them off to food stamps. They just don't know how. It's too difficult. Yeah. It's challenging to get through all their regulations. And so I think the idea is great. And I think companies would take great advantage of it because right now they're just pushing it on to the employee to go do the welfare stuff because it's too challenging. So I think it's a great idea. I think you're going to capture a lot of people's attention from it because they would rather go the direction of providing a quality job with high value employees that they can pay living wages for. So I comment on it. I think it's really good. And especially for those smaller, less than 100 person companies who might not have the resources to go through it alone. So I like it.
Yeah. I think I should have said, I need to say, I don't think a lot of these programs, there's some exceptions like Tech Hire that are that aren't financially worth it for a company that has less than 10 employees. I think most of these benefits, I think really start to become interesting in the 10 to 100, then obviously 100 plus employees. And you really start to see a difference on your balance sheet for making some investments in tapping into these programs. I think part of the message to entrepreneurs today is like, have these in your zone of awareness as you grow and, design for some of these programs. I will say too, most of these programs now have living wage requirements to tap into. If you're paying someone $15 an hour, you typically can't tap into most of these programs. They're looking for the living wage standard, which is benchmarked to cost of living, which is San Diego is closer to $18, $19 an hour. And so I think if you're interested in scaling or you're on a path in scaling 1 to 5, 10 years from now, and I think it's important to kind of have these in your mind for how you design your jobs, how you design your training programs. And then you can kind of optimize for government incentives. But yeah, Samuel, I think you're right. If for a company with 1 or 2 founders who are trying to put out a product, most of this stuff isn't quite relevant for you today.
I always say too, it's like you start off by saying, Andy, that you help people along that path, right? I think it's good early on for any startup that you're aware of certain things, right? And as you hit each milestone, you'll be better equipped that that you at least have some of this on you. I've got this spirit of awareness. Is that what you're actually saying?
Yeah.
A lot of startups say like, Curling, when should I talk to? I do want to get investment. I do want to have that. And I said, you know what? One, you could focus on your customer, focus on your product, right? But I do want you to have some early talks with maybe someone you admire, an investor or Sequoia. I want you to have these early dots. And then as you move forward, then you already have this relationship already, right? You already have some of this, even as 2 years down the line, you've already talked with this investor. You've already talked with this partner for a number of times, and that you've had established this relationship. I still feel like some of the things that you've laid out are kind of like these things you kind of get to know early on and understand and say, okay, it's going to take about this amount of effort. Maybe I can hire someone who could just help me with things with HR. Because I love the one thing I love what you said too is actually like, hey, this is for the HR. Okay, so most startups don't have an HR department. But when I do, when I do have someone focus on that, I'm going to actually have them at least 10 to 20% look at these type of things and be focused on it, right?
Yeah, and maybe, I think so, Curling. And I think too, like maybe you're at a stage in your startup where you've built your product, you're starting to get some initial sales, and you're like, okay, I need to go raise a round to build human capital. Maybe it's a a customer service team or some other kind of team of 5 or 6 people. And so instead of giving, maybe you need to raise $500,000 instead of giving, X percent of your equity, you could instead raise 250 grand and then match the other 250 grand that you need with some of these programs and hire. So and save some of the equity that you need for yourself. And so I don't know precisely where everyone is on their entrepreneurial journey, but when it comes to raising money and giving away your equity in exchange for that, I think it's worth a look and some financial modeling from someone who knows what they're doing to say you know what, if these are the roles that you're going to hire with this venture money or this loan or whatever, these roles fit really good into some of these programs. Maybe we can think more creatively and more non-traditionally about how we staff up for this or that need. And so, founders keeping equity, I think, is generally a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Roger, I've seen you shaking your head on that aspect of that part. Any feedback?
Yeah, I'm early enough in my phase to think of stuff like that or be worried about giving away a lot of equity. So I really appreciate you saying that, Andy. I had a question popped into my mind. I think you mentioned in January that you went full time with the new venture. How did you get there? Because I feel that's probably one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs is that making that transition and breaking away from the potential fear of making that transition. What were your steps going through that? What were your thought processes? I don't know how much time we have left. This could be a big thing, right?
That's a good question.
Maybe some of your best takeaways on making that leap.
Yeah.
Great question, Roger.
Yeah, I think two main points. One, it was a little easier because it's a professional services company, so people are paying me for my time, and I had a few clients kind of lined up, and so I didn't have a big 6 to 12 month or more product development stage where I'm putting hard money in and not getting anything out. I had clients from kind of day one, including my old client I'm working with the workforce partnership as an independent contractor still. So I kind of had these things, it's pretty smooth runway. And then the second point I guess I'll say is it was still really scary, even with all that.
Yeah.
Almost in an irrational way. I've always had a W-2 job, since I got my first one after, way before college, but I've never had a non-W-2 job. And, towards the end of January and early February, when some of my invoices were still not being paid, and I was kind of normally 3 paychecks, 6 weeks in and 3 paychecks. I would have had 3 paychecks and instead of 0. I started even though I planned for this, had some savings, talk with my partner about what we're expecting and when would be the time when it's okay, it's time to go back and get a real job. Even with all those things in place, I still had this low grade irrational anxiety about where is the money coming from. And then just this week, my first invoices got paid. My bank account is there's numbers in the bank account. I got a steady stream of work lined up, and so I feel better now. But despite all of these things that I with a soft landing, there's still this irrational fear of just doing something a little different than what I've always done, which is a steady, good, well-paying W-2 job that I enjoyed. And so yeah, I guess that's the response. I think people in this cohort, are taking a much bigger leap than I am, but it still felt big to me.
It's still big. There's a book we always read, Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman. One of the dilemmas, and the biggest one, is called the career dilemma. Meaning that you could go down that path, you still be on a career, you could be working at a Fortune 500, but that is one of the biggest fears is leaving that and then going on. So I feel like you took a huge leap, actually, versus you just coming out of Clark University and saying, "Hey, I just graduated. Hey, let me start this startup." I think that's a little easier leap, I feel.
Yeah, I guess more family and all that stuff.
Right, exactly, yeah. So yeah.
And just a plug, Curling, you told me to read that book early on. I did. And now I'm at the point where I have more work than I can do myself. And so I need to make decisions about bringing on partners, employees, contractors, and I think the whole kind of king or queen versus
Yes.
be
The
rich,
rich. Yeah.
dilemma is coming up to me. I don't think I'm gonna, I'm not saying I'm gonna be rich, but like, do I scale or do I keep control and do my own thing? Like that question is coming up now for me way sooner than I thought. So that book was really helpful.
Oh, I guess that's great. It's great to hear. Totally great to hear. We're coming to the end. I was like, if you were talking to a young Andy, a little Andy, he's got his company, right? He's like 1 year in, right? 3 employees. Like, what would you tell that young Andy, based on some of the knowledge you have now?
Yeah, like you mean when I'm older, when I'm your age, what am I telling me now? Or
No, I say, I can phrase it. I can phrase it in this way. What are 1 or 2 tips you would give from this talk, right? That young Andy could take in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will say that that they should have done it earlier. I actually, for me, that wasn't the case. I think I felt like I did it. I kind of made this leap kind of at the right time for me and my
Sure.
family, and that
like
was
that.
something that I would just say, like, you had a lot of anxiety about when and how, but I think you kind of, you did that right. And so, when you have some of this other anxiety, low grade anxiety about how things are going to shape out or where the next client's going to come from, just remember that that like it's going to work out if you keep kind of just waking up and grinding and doing what you do. And then the second thing I did, so my first client was a very small project. It was like a week project, and and it was something in my field kind of generally, but the technical skills needed was not mine. But I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Sure.
And I struggled. It was a small project. It was probably a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
I spent way more hours than needed to add value to my client.
Exactly.
And so ultimately I had a conversation with that client. I said, hey, I've been doing this work. I'm not adding value. Like, I'm not going to invoice you. Like, I learned my lesson to only kind of take on the stuff that I know that I'm an expert
That's great.
at. And actually I now have a much larger contract with that client. So I kind of, the lesson is to not to like chase the opportunity, but to like get clear on what I know that I'm good at.
That's great.
And then, so I totally messed. My first project was like a disaster. I was like, I don't know how to do this.
No, it's great. It's great. It's kind of like you don't know what you know, right? But I love the fact that we always use that word MVP. Like, okay, what's this thing I can give value to, and let's focus on that, and then you can start getting adjacent skills and stuff like that. But I know Annie, you're really great at communicating. You're really great at least giving visibility to these obscure things. So thank you for doing that today. I always appreciate you. Thanks, Roger, for with drone energy. You totally gave the 30 seconds. That was great. Mono, thanks for giving the face of Tech Hire, but also EBT. Thanks for all the stuff that you're doing in San Diego, and Professor Clark. Appreciate you, all your feedback. Also with the Innovation Hub. I will let everyone go. Andy, appreciate you. Take care, and we'll see each other next Thursday.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
All right.